Hello guys and gals, and welcome to another episode of Fixing Diablo 2. Today we're going to be talking about another skill that doesn't really get as much use as it probably should, and there are some reasons behind that. There's actually a history that we can go over and we can talk about when it comes to Thorns, Iron Maiden, and Spirit of the Barbs. This is a character that I built entirely around Thorns. His name is GGM Cactus, and it was interesting. I've done a lot of Thorns various builds, and I've tried to make Thorns viable, especially since they've made some changes to Thorns. And we need to talk about exactly what Thorns is as well. So, first off, let's pull up a little notepad here, and we need to talk about the two different kinds of Thorns that there currently are within the game. One kind of Thorns is a return percentage. This means that if a monster does, say, 100 damage to you, and you have a bonus percentage that is going to add, say, 1,000% to the monster, then it is then returned to the monster at that increased rate. Thorns, at the moment, has a return percentage of 1,530, as you can see. That's with level 33 Thorns. There is also Attacker Takes Damage of. Now, this was an attempt by the Blizzard, well, not Blizzard, Vicarious Visions to fix the problem with Thorns. Now, the problem with this form of Thorns is that you have to be hit. So this is very important to note, is that you have to take damage. If you do not take damage, then you do not return damage. And this is an issue, of course, because, well, your amount of life is finite, and you can only be hit so many times before you die. So this form of Thorns is limited in that it requires you to be beat down. Attacker Takes Damage of, which is usually a raw number, insert number here, is a type of damage that actually works regardless of whether you have been hit or not. Now, this is very important to note, because if you do not get hit with Attacker Takes a Damage, like, for instance, if I were to go to, say, normal difficulty, where the monsters are going to have an extremely hard time actually even touching me with 4,507 defense, most of the monsters in this area will have less than a 10% chance of actually hitting me. And you'll notice that despite the fact that they have a 5% chance of hitting me, they can still kill themselves on the Attacker Takes Damage of. And I am not taking damage, and this is specifically because Attacker Takes Damage of does not require that the monster hits you. And Attacker Takes Damage of works separately from the other mechanic, and so now we have two different mechanics running at the same time. So does not require the monster hit you. Now, on top of this, we also have some other caveats, which is usually ranged monsters do not trigger the effect of these things, and we can actually go test this out. Usually there's some nice ranged monsters in Frigid Highlands. Let's go check. Do we have rangies? Do we have rangies? No rangies, really? That's rare. It's very rare for there not to be ranged monsters in Frigid Highlands. Let's go. Let's try one more time. Let's try again. Man, no ranged monsters again? Well, these guys are technically ranged, although not really. As you can see, though, they're not triggering the effects. They're ranged monsters. They're not triggering Thorns, right? If I get within melee range, though, and they hit me within melee range, then they can trigger the effect. But at range, they do not trigger the effect. So we run into some other issues, which is basically where Thorns does not work against ranged monsters. So this is a big con. And we can also, by this, assume including spells. So spells also do not trigger this. Which means that this pretty much only works against melee monsters, which is a really big restriction in what it can potentially do. It causes issues like, okay, well, what is this actually good for then if it can only hit monsters that are, well, in melee range? And there's even more problems with thorns. And this is normal difficulty, by the way, and you can still not killing anything quite fast. Another problem with thorns is that the attack rate of the monsters is actually pretty much set. So this is something that has been learned for a long time, is that monsters just attack relatively slowly. As you can see, this particular monster here is attacking like once every like 2 seconds or something along those lines. It's not exactly a particularly great rate. And look at these freaking, look at all these things I got here. 15%, 8 min damage jewels. Why do I got 8 min damage jewels in my inventory? Oh yeah, I remember, because I was going to be crafting. And I was literally just using them as crafting jewels. Because this is offline single player, and I was just trying to make something fun. So, we run into another problem, which is the monsters attack really slow. So, your damage comes specifically from the NPC attacking you, but the NPC attacks slowly. All right, and this is a big issue because, of course, well, the slower that they attack, the less damage they do. But this is even more of a big issue for another reason, and it's one of the biggest hurdles for Thorns ever becoming a useful skill. Well, more useful than it currently is, outside of like summon necromancers and summon druids. Actually on the paladin being useful. Is that basically what happens is, because they attack so slowly, the monsters will actually start to regenerate their HP in higher difficulties. They have relatively large amounts of resistances, physical resistances, and physical resistance is the main issue here because, number one, all Thorns damage is returned as physical, and the majority of the monsters in the game are physical resistant. So it does cause an issue with this. Number two is, even after they start dishing out, hold on, let me, I'd actually have to make myself survivable enough so I can actually do something. I don't have any stat points dedicated to vitality. There we go. And I also don't have any points in Holy Shield. Let's grab Holy Shield. We're not actually going to be attacking anything, so let's just go ahead and grab a bunch of health potions. Now, when you go out here in the hell difficulty and you let monsters wail on you with thorns, one of the things that you're going to notice is that the monsters actually regenerate the damage that they take quicker than the thorns is actually dishing it out. So they'll hit you, they'll take the thorns damage, and then very quickly they'll regenerate that self-same thorns damage back to full. And a lot of people mistake this as the monster's not taking thorns damage, but that's not actually what's happening. What's happening is that the monsters have such a slow attack speed in between their multiple attacks that they're able to almost completely regenerate the damage that is done to you within that period of time, especially if they miss and they don't trigger the return percentage, and they're only triggering the thorns damage directly. So in this situation, you can see that the monsters are clearly not taking damage, but they're still getting hit by the thorns. So how does this actually work, and why is thorns not functioning the way that it's supposed to? Well, the reason why it's not functioning the way that it's supposed to is, if we go back to the sheet here, they're attacking so slowly that the regeneration, the natural regeneration of the monster, is outpacing the damage of the thorns. This is something that has always been an issue with thorns in higher difficulties, because the monsters have such high resistances and the monsters attack so slowly, and there's a lot of other problems that come into play. But essentially, it really just comes down to that the monsters just have very high regeneration. Now, to demonstrate this, I can show you a situation. I need some prevent monster heal is what I need, which I don't even know if I have some prevent monster heal on this character. Here we go, Flesh Ripper. That'll do. So I've got a Flesh Ripper here that has prevent monster heal on it. Alright, so how do we do this? Well, we're just going to go outside. We're just going to tap each one of these monsters with the prevent monster heal. So if we draw a couple monsters over, I'm going to go ahead and tap this monster with prevent monster heal. tap that monster with Prevent Monster Heal. Now that they're no longer able to regenerate, which Prevent Monster Heal completely arrests all regeneration, you can actually see that the damage is actually starting to accumulate on the monsters, and they would actually eventually slowly kill themselves. And this is, I think, one of the biggest issues with Thorns, or any of the Thorns. Iron Maiden, Thorns, Spirit of the Barbs. In fact, you know what? Let's get Spirit of the Barbs out here, too. Any of these abilities has an issue because the regeneration of the monster just simply outpaces everything. One of the solutions that I would make to Thorns, and it's a very simple one, is give all of the Thorns abilities, Iron Maiden, Spirit of the Barbs, and Thorns, the ability to apply Open Wounds. Open Wounds only lasts for 8 seconds. Yes, it does damage. But what this would do is that when a monster hits a player or an NPC or one of your minions or whatever that has Thorns, what it's going to do is it's going to allow that monster to obtain Open Wounds. Now, what that percentage would be is not exactly something that I have worked out. I'm not entirely sure. Monsters attack relatively slowly. Anything that's too low would be absolutely useless, and anything that's not high enough would be way too powerful. I have tested on, say, like a Smite Paladin, and on a Smite Paladin, anything below 10% is actually not enough, and it will often not apply within any given period of time, and the monster will just regenerate back to full as a result. This means that you can't have 100% uptime on the ability. I definitely would not want 100% because 100% is just too much. It doesn't need to be 100%. If we had an Open Wounds on Thorns of something, say, like 25% to maybe 35%, I'm not exactly sure where the sweet spot is here. It would help Thorns tremendously because Thorns would then be able to stop the regeneration on its own. Basically saying that when a monster hits you while you have Thorns up and they have wounds, then there's a very chance that they can tear open their wounds on those Thorns and cause an issue. I mean, and to go back again and take a look, you can clearly see that the monsters are just not taking damage while I have no Prevent Monster Heal on them. If I tag them with Prevent Monster Heal, I'm going to tag each one of these guys with Prevent Monster Heal. Now they actually start taking damage. Prevent Monster Heal is 20 minutes, and it's way too long. And in my personal opinion, I don't think Prevent Monster Heal is a good choice for this. I think Open Wounds is a good choice for this, and the reason why Open Wounds is such a good choice for Thorns is because it's a short duration ability. It only lasts 8 seconds. It requires active, hitting a target. The monster has to actively be beating on you. It's not something that you're going to be able to just apply to the monster and then just run away and not, come back. It's also not going to be useful outside of, obviously, actually using Thorns. Now, granted, this would give pretty much every player in the game the ability to have some form of Open Wounds through the use of the Act 3 Mercenary. Act 2 Mercenary. The Act 2 Mercenary, of course, has access to Thorns. You could also get access to Thorns via the Edge Bow, which the Edge Bow, ironically, also has Prevent Monster Heal on it. You can also get access to Thorns via something like the Spirit of the Barbs, which I actually am utilizing Wisp Projector, which does have level 7 Spirit of the Barbs on it. So that would be another way that you could potentially get access to Open Wounds. Open Wounds is not so ridiculously powerful or so ridiculously hard to come by that I feel like it would be breaking the game to give Thorns a % chance to apply Open Wounds. As it is right now, I think that Thorns is properly set up damage-wise. It does actually output a significant amount of damage. If you set up for attacker takes damage of, you can actually get your attacker takes damage of number pretty darn high. I think I have mine currently at 609 attacker takes damage of. And in general, I think this is the easiest way to fix how Thorns works, and so that it actually does damage. In any difficulty, Thorns is okay. It does some damage, okay. It's like, all right, it does something. But giving it the ability to apply a percentage chance of open wounds would fix the fact that it basically does nothing in hell difficulty. Whenever you're fighting, it doesn't matter what you're fighting. If you're fighting any monster with thorns up, it just looks so unimpressive as you watch the monster's HP go like this and then go straight back up as it regenerates. Goes like this and then goes straight back up as it regenerates. And it just simply applying Prevent Monster Heal to the target fixes that. It literally fixes it so that the damage that Thorns does actually stays on the target. And Open Wounds only stays on the target for 8 seconds. So it would still only stay on the target for 8 seconds, which I think is more than enough to fix the way that this works. Now, I don't propose giving attacker takes damage of Open Wounds, and I don't propose giving like any item that has attacker takes damage of Open Wounds. The goal here is to only give the abilities that actually are castable. So this would apply to Iron Maiden, it would apply to Thorns, and it would apply to Spirit of the Barbs, and that's it. Those 3 abilities would get a % chance to apply Open Wounds to the target when the monster hits something with melee. Now, the really interesting thing about this is it's self-balancing. You might be thinking, well, that sounds OP as all get out, right? But what we had talked about earlier is that Thorns does not work against ranged monsters or spellcasters, which means that you would be unable to apply Open Wounds to any monster that is unwilling to hit anything within melee range, which means that this does not work against skeleton archers, it does not work against like Oblivion mages, it does not work against any boss that refuses to attack in melee. Like, for instance, if your boss is just spamming spells over and over again, it's not going to allow you to apply Open Wounds to a boss that just spams spells. For instance, Bale very rarely melee attacks. Most of the time he's spamming Cold Cone, he's spamming his clone spells, he's spamming his tentacles, he spams his spell that steals your mana, and so forth and so on. So it would have a hard time applying to the majority of the monsters within the game, but it would actually work versus the monsters that do actually hit the monster that you have the Thorns ability on. And this would technically also apply to the Iron Golem, because the Iron Golem also has a Thorns aura around him. So the Iron Golem would get a buff from this as well, because the Iron Golem would also apply a Open Wounds to monsters that are wailing on him. I think this one small change to Thorns would make a massive difference in its usability, its interest, like people's interest in actually putting points into the ability, because what you could do is you could also have it set up so that the percentage chance of Open Wounds goes up as you level up the ability. So maybe, for instance, when you start at level 1 with Thorns, so if you have relatively low level Thorns, it only has maybe like a 1% chance. And then by the time you get to, say, level 35, it has a 35% chance of applying Open Wounds, and so forth and so on, right? So you could make it very clear that if people want to get access to this Open Wounds that is applied by Thorns, you actually have to invest points. You would have to invest points into Thorns, you would have to invest points into Spirit of the Barbs, you would have to invest points into Iron Maiden, you would have to invest points into Iron Golem. It would be something that you would actually have to put points into to get the effect. The Act 2 Mercenary, if I remember correctly, he has a pretty high Thorns already. So, like, if you were running the Act 2 Mercenary, you could get a pretty decent level there. Thorns, there we go. So he has level 28 at level 98, which is a pretty high level. So he would have like a level 28% chance to apply Open Wounds to any monster that hit him. I think that's the easiest way to deal with this entire problem with Thorns and the regeneration issue, is that once you arrest the regeneration, you fix the fact that Thorns isn't doing damage. And once you fix the fact that Thorns isn't doing damage, then Thorns becomes more useful on the whole. Your Necromancers might be more interested in using a Thorns Merc than a Might Merc. Your Summon Druid might be more interested in using Spirit of the Barbs than he would Heart of the Wolverine or Heart of the Oak. Your Necromancer might actually consider casting Iron Maiden as opposed to casting amplified damage for, the ability to arrest regeneration. There are a lot of different ways that you could potentially utilize these abilities, and even the paladin himself might be interested in utilizing Thorns if it applied open wounds in the process and stopped the regeneration of all the monsters around him. Could be very interesting for like a Zeal Thorns paladin or something. All in all, I think that's pretty much it. I don't really have much more to say about Thorns. It does have other issues, as I've pointed out, like the fact that it doesn't work against spellcasters and the fact that it doesn't work against, like ranged characters and whatnot. And I don't think it's ever going to be a ridiculous skill that can do the most amazing things in the world. It's not going to be like your Fist of the Heavens. It's not going to be like your concentration aura or whatever. But I feel like at least going down this route and giving it some usefulness so that it's more interesting and more appealing to people is definitely a good thing. And on top of that, that would also raise the interest of bramble armor. It would raise the interest of the edge bow. It would raise the interest of items like the Wisp Projector, because it would make the Spirit of Barbs that comes from the Wisp Projector be more interesting to apply open wounds to those monsters around it, and so forth and so on. It's just something that could be a game changer for the Thorns abilities. There are some interesting things we can talk about when it comes to the history of Thorns and why it kind of started to fall off tremendously. First off, Thorns was really OP when it first came out. But what happened is that Diablo 2 LOD launched. So it's very important to remember that D2 to D2 LOD was a very odd change. In D2, there were no synergies, and the monsters had low HP. Which means that when a monster hit you, for instance, like say a monster did 100 damage a hit, right? So 100 damage a hit. The monsters that did 100 damage a hit maybe only had like 1,000 HP themselves. And so 100 HP a hit was basically 1/10 of the monster's HP that you were returning back to the monster, or in the case of Thorns, which could do like up to like 1,000% damage in return, it would be a one shot. You could like literally one shot a monster if it would come up to you and hit you when it hit Thorns. In D2 LOD, what happened is they added synergies, increasing player damage across the board. And when they did this, they also increased monster HP to accommodate. So the same monster that did 100 damage a hit before now has an HP of 10,000. The damage that the monster did not go up because our HP did not go up. So the thing here that you have to understand is that the monster's HP went up, but not their damage. And so when Thorns got nerfed in D2 LOD, it was mainly because of the fact that synergies were added. Synergies are the main cause for Thorns' downfall because the HP of the monsters increased, but their damage didn't. And then what happened is the percentage of damage that was being returned by Thorns didn't really change either. So returning 100 damage to a monster that has 10,000 HP versus a monster that has 1,000 HP suddenly went from a one-shot to now 1/10 of the monster's HP. And you can see how this changed the way that Thorns worked and its effectiveness dramatically. Now, I'm not necessarily against Thorns having trouble killing monsters, because in Diablo 4 and in many other games that have set up Thorns can sometimes be the most overpowered thing in existence. Which is why I'm perfectly fine with leaving Thorns the way that it is right now. I just want to see some way for Thorns to arrest regeneration so that it can actually dish out damage. Because it does dish out damage right now. It does. It just can't do it very effectively because of the way that things are currently set up. On top of this, and this is one other little small caveat, I know I've gone way too far, Spirit of the Barbs. Spirit of the Barbs was kind of nerfed back when they originally were changing some of the Thorns abilities. And what do I mean by they nerfed it? Well, they changed it entirely to attacker takes damage of. And Spirit of the Barbs shouldn't be entirely attacker takes damage of. It should be similar to the way that Thorns work, which is a return percentage plus attacker takes damage of. And I don't know why they changed Thorns to be specifically attacker takes damage of, but they really need to fix Spirit of the Barbs. Spirit of the Barbs. They really need to fix Spirit of the Barbs so that it also has a return percentage as well. Because as it is right now, with only attacker takes damage of, it is much less effective than Thorns is in the same regard. And then Iron Maiden, I believe, also has a similar thing going on. Let me pull up Necromancer real quick. I believe Iron Maiden is also sitting on a situation where it's just return percentage, and it's not attacker takes damage of. Yes, it's just return percentage. So they need to take Iron Maiden, and what they need to do with Iron Maiden is just simply make it so that Iron Maiden has some attacker takes damage of as well as the return percentage. I like Thorns set up with both the attacker takes damage of and the return percentage. It is very important, I think, that it has both. And as it is right now, Iron Maiden only has one, which is the return percentage, and not the attacker takes damage of, so it needs to have the attacker takes damage of added. Spirit of the Barbs only has the attacker takes damage of, and not the return percentage, and it needs to have the return percentage added. And I think that's pretty much it. Anyway, as always, I do appreciate you guys and gals watching my videos. I'd love to hear what you have to think about Thorns. And as always, keep watching.